Welcome to another episode of the Get Fast podcast, brought to you by Triathlon Coaching. You are joined as always by your host, former Australian Ironman Gerard Donnelly, and I am Jordan Donnelly. In today's episode, we are talking about how to handle race nerves. It's something we've all probably experienced somewhere in some degree, in some race. Some level of anxiety or nerves before a race. So straight off the bat, I want to ask you, Dad, when's a time when you let race nerves get the better of you?
Well, I think there's a direct correlation between my preparedness for the event, and it doesn't have to be a race, and my nervousness. And I can have that in a training session. If I feel that I'm not possibly going to complete the session the way I want to, I have a fair bit of pre-event anxiety around that. And even people I coach have said to me that they're really worried about tomorrow's session. So nervousness and anxiety before a race or for a particular event is really detrimental to the outcome a lot of the times, because it really zaps your confidence. And there's been many times when I've been in that situation, and the correlation between my preparedness and the anxiety is undeniable.
So is that what you're saying, that the more prepared you are, the less anxious you'll be?
Definitely. There's so many examples that I have in my career where I've been on the start line and I've had some nerves, but the nerves have been around my execution of the event. And I suppose I'm talking more in time trialing, where it's an individual thing, where you're in total control of the outcome. It doesn't matter what anybody else does in the race. You can only do what you can do on that race. If someone else starts off harder than you, you don't know that they're doing that because they're a minute apart, or they could be 5 minutes up the road. So you're only focusing on your own performance. So I definitely have anxiety about my execution, but I'm confident in being able to execute it because I've prepared myself well. So having nerves and anxiety, I think, is a really good thing, because it shows you care totally about what you're about to do. And if you don't have them, that's really unusual. So it's really important that people understand that's normal to have some sort of anxiety or pre-race nerves when you're going to do something that you care about. You care about the outcome, so you create some nervousness about that, and it's no different to going into an exam or to a job interview. You know, you want to get that job, so you have got butterflies, and you're thinking, oh, I really have to answer questions really well here. I have to execute my performance really well, and you know, sometimes I'm really overly nervous as compared to being almost too relaxed in other times, and is almost like overconfident. I'm not sure. I'm overconfident in my preparedness. That's definitely, but I still know that I'm confident in my performance. But then the nervousness might come from, is it good enough to win the event? So that might be another level of anxiety, is I know what I can do, but is that good enough to win?
That's a really good point, because when you say the word nervous or anxious, or I've got anxiety for the race, you know, that is going to be a different thing for every person. So everyone is going to have a different meaning of that. It's going to mean something different to them, and they're going to have different levels of almost that image you think about inside your head of what that means to you. And when you think you're anxious or you're nervous, you're thinking about a certain image, and that's different to someone else's. And like you said, depending on whether you are training or racing, I know personally that I get nervous for a session because I know how hard it's going to be. I just know how much it's going to hurt. I'm not nervous about how I'm going to perform. And that's kind of a different nervous to the race, where you're thinking about the end outcome. And sometimes when you're letting your nerves get the better of you, you're just imagining the outcome going wrong. And it's just not a really good thing to be visualizing before a race.
Yeah, the nerves definitely come in a variety of ways. And, you know, there's external influences, and there's your own internal influences. Externally, it can be, I've told people I'm going to do this event, and my expectation from others around me creates anxiety because they expect me to win. They expect me to perform well. I might have people coming to watch. all these external influences create an anxiety level. You might have your own internal levels of anxiety, such as my goal today is to win. My goal today is to perform at this pace if I'm running, or this power number if I'm riding. So the nerves can come from internal and from external, and you can have both. The people who are internally motivated, they seem to handle the nerves better because they're so focused on the outcome and the execution, and therefore the outcome will become apparent. So they're motivated in their training because they've got this goal and almost target, and they're valuing the moment to get the outcome. Whereas the people who are externally motivated, they get more nervous because they've got less control of what they're doing, because they're putting themselves under pressure because of external influences. Whereas the internally motivated person, I think, has a better control over their nerves, and they actually prepare better than the person who picks a race and tells everybody they're training for this race, but actually doesn't do the consistency and all the things that underlie getting a great preparation.
So how have you handled that yourself when the stakes of the race are bigger, when you get to a bigger race and it means more? You said before that when there's a lot of pressure on the actual result of the race, that can lead to increased nerves for yourself. So what have you done in those situations where you've been in some big races and it's meant a lot?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the more times you put yourself into that position, come that really big race that you've earmarked as this is my race for the year, and it could be a selection trial for a national team, it could be the national titles, it could be a state title. So you've created that this is a big race for me. And if you haven't done a lot of racing along the journey, come race day, it's foreign feeling to you. So the anxiety levels, you're feeling something that's new. And I think for myself, and this is true for a lot of people that I coach, if you put them in a race situation a lot, in seemingly less important races, but they still get the day before nerves, the preparation, all the things that go with performance, then at the end of the day, it becomes just another race if you execute it, and then the result will be what you wanted, and it just happens to be in the most important race of the day, of your year.
And it doesn't have to be an external, like you said, an externally big event like a national title. If you've set this Ironman as your A race, then that is your particular A race, and all the B races that you do in the lead up are designed to counter that. And that's probably why you say all the time that we do so much testing as well. It's replicating, whether it's a race or a time trial test, it's replicating the same thing.
There's so many valuable things to do when you continually test, and we test for a whole lot of reasons, but the main one is to practice the execution that you're going to do on race day. The other things are that we get to find out what level you're at for a particular month, and we train to that level going into the next month and try to improve. It's like a really hard training session. So there's three standout reasons why you would test so much, and by practicing that, come race day, you are so ready for. It's kind of a normal feeling that you're about to experience, and that diminishes the anxiety for me. I've done this, 500 times in the last 2 years. I know what my wattage is. All I've got to do is make sure I don't go too hard at the start. And we joked at the Nationals, and I've told you this story. The Nationals time trial course had a downhill section in the first 5 minutes, and the remainder of the next 20 minutes of the course was undulating, but gradually up to the turn and then gradually back down to the finish, but undulating. But the first section was really fast downhill. And I said to a couple of guys, especially one of the guys, Joe, I said, if I look at your data at the end of this event and find that your first 5 minutes is the highest power, I'm going to bash you in the back of the head. And he said, and I'm going to do the same to you. And both of us executed our best power in the last 5 minutes and our lowest powers in the first 5 minutes, even though we were going downhill and literally flying along the course. And that was the game changer. And Joe ended up winning his national title by 7 seconds, I think. And had he not executed properly, he would have lost that. He came home like a steam train. The other guys were fading. It was a great example to me, of sure, you can be nervous and worried about it, but if you don't execute, you're not going to get the outcome anyway. So all the nerves in the world are not going to help you. So it was a matter of focusing on different things, and that took the nerve. You stopped thinking about nerves because you had a purpose for the execution of the event. And time trialing is a lot different because there's not a lot of external things happening in a time trial, whereas in a road race, you have to react to other people's attacks or the way the race is panning out. There's so many things you have to think about, and I think that creates a little bit of anxiety. Who's going to do what today in this race? Whereas in a time trial, you can only control the things you can control. You can't control how anybody else is going to ride.
And that's why you say in triathlons it's so much more predictable with your performance, because
yes,
it's so those very variable factors are taken out.
Yeah, and look at in running races, marathons, 10K events, you're still influenced by other people's pace. Whereas in a triathlon, unless you got off with people in your age group all around you and were influenced by their pace, as professionals are, but the age groupers really aren't. And most of the people we're coaching are people who are trying for a PB. So everything's in their control, the pace they start at. So the anxiety and nervousness is almost taken away. And that's the big difference we talk about come race day. You know how well you've trained because you've got all the data telling you. You know your race plan because it's in front of you. The only nervousness that you've created is, can I actually execute that race plan? And that creates a little bit of anxiety, but you need to be confident because you've already raced so many times beforehand. Someone said to me on the weekend, I used to be afraid totally of doing FTP tests, of going into races, and forever testing myself. And I got really nervous about it was because I didn't like what I thought the outcome would be. And now that I'm training with some structure and consistency, I embrace them because I know that I'm possibly going to improve from last time. So it's a different mindset. And it's how you frame it really determines how nervous you become. If you let the nerves get carried away, it's because you're thinking about the wrong things. And that's what I'm trying to get across in what we're talking about today, is making sure you're thinking about things you can control. The things that are out of your control, you just need to disregard, and just focus your whole entire thought process on the things that you are in charge of.
And you will feel a sense of ease when you start focusing on the race plan and you start focusing on what you need to do. If you're just asking yourself, how am I going to perform? If you're asking questions that are just not going to have good answers, how am I going to perform? Things you can't answer at the moment. What's going to happen today? Is it going to be hard? If you're just continuously asking those questions, it's not going to be a very good feeling. Whereas if you're just running through the race plan, I need to go out the first 5 minutes of this pace. I want to come home like a steam train, like you were saying before. Immediately those nerves will ease up a little bit. But like you said at the start, some nerves are important because it shows you care and you want to get a good result.
Yeah, and in life that if you've got nothing to do for a particular day or week and you have no goal, your mind starts running all sorts of tricks on you. And, that's a lot of how depression happens, is because people have no focus or goal of every day. The busier people, of course they can get, depressed and have anxiety. But because they're focusing on tasks all the time, they don't have time to think about the nervousness that they're feeling, because there's such structure that they have to get through each day, and you can relate that to your race. I'm nervous. I'm really worried about this. This is going to be a big day. I have to perform well. I put all my season into this. Reframe the whole thought process. Okay, can't wait for this race. This is my plan. This is how I'm going to attack it. And all of a sudden, your focus is on something completely different to what you were focusing on before. And in fact, it's on the important thing, which is how am I going to execute it? So I keep going back to that word execute, and the relationship between preparedness and the relationship between execution and nerves are equal. Getting ready for it and executing on the day. So the nerves will be less if you're prepared well, and they'll be less if you focus on the execution. And as we said at the start, it is important to have some butterflies and some anxiety, because it shows you actually really value what you're doing. And you will be more successful in anything you do if you value it. And we've always said this to most of the people who come on board, we want you to enjoy it. So have fun executing to numbers that you know you can do. And it is such a great feeling getting towards the end when you are actually hitting all the numbers, going for a PB in your 10K. You are just so satisfied with the outcome. And the nerves and the anxiety, they're a distant past.
What kind of examples have you seen of people letting race nerves get too much a hold of their race and derailing their preparation and their execution?
Yeah, many times as athletes have come to me after the race saying, I didn't realise that I was going to feel as good as I did. And I didn't go with the move because I was still not confident. And at the end of the race, I should have done that, is the thing that comes back to me all the time. So don't be overconfident, but be confident in your ability from the training you've done. And they're examples of people who have really let the nerves hinder their decision making in the middle of a race. Oh, that's a good move going up the road. I should be doing that, and they hesitate. But a confident person, they'd see a move and go. And I'm talking bike races here, or I'm talking triathlon run at the end of the race and 5K to go, and you're starting to see people in your age group maybe come past you, and rather than focusing on should I let that happen, you just instinctively make those decisions and take away the nervous thought process of should I, shouldn't I. The amount of times I've told people, go with your gut. If you think that's what you should do, don't hesitate, do it. But the going with your gut is based on so much information that you have about what you're able to do and the feelings you have of your body at that particular time.
And it's thinking about, where are you going, where do you want to be putting your energy, your mental and physical energy, because you don't want to be wasting energy on those thought processes. You don't want to be wasting energy before the race and during the race on that kind of thinking, because it's just going to detract from your performance. And I mean, without getting into too much of the psychology side of it, and we're not psychologists, but the common rhetoric in psychology is that anxiety is a very natural process of the body. The fight or flight response is necessary for our survival. We need to have that response when we're in danger, and for it to be an alarm bell of when we need to change something. But that when that response is really extreme before a race, that's not a natural response. That's unnecessary, and so we don't need to give it that much attention or energy. So if you're feeling that unwarranted level, we need to kind of think about these strategies and change our mental thought processes to take that level back to what would be considered a normal level.
Yeah, the reframing your thought process is so key, and the fight or flight response is such an accurate way of how people can burn unlimited amounts of energy pre-race because they're thinking about the wrong things. And that's one of the things I want people to understand here is reframe your thought process. And you're doing, if you're getting more and more nervous before something, start asking yourself, what does this mean to me today? Is it something like the end of the world that no, it's just another event in a process of something that you enjoy doing. So, take the fight or flight feel away from it and say, right, I'm here for fun and to execute. And don't be so single-minded that, you're not enjoying the thing. If that's the state you're putting yourself in, then you need to rethink why you're doing it. And I think that's a real key to nervous and anxiety. If it's creating too much of that, you've got to reframe your thinking.
it's a funny little game you have to play with yourself, don't you? You really have to go through this self-talk process and talk yourself through it and say, well, hang on a second, there's no real danger. I don't have to feel this level of anxiety. But it's almost like wanting to challenge yourself as well. And we speak about, all the great examples of elite sportsmen. And we've spoken about Michael Jordan a bit recently because of his documentary where he would be nervous before those big games, but he would be demanding the ball because he's saying, I'm nervous, but I want to challenge myself and I want to see if I can do this. And it's almost that little bit of it's that balance again of playing the game of take away that unnecessary anxiety, but also relish in the anxiety and say, well, this means a lot to me and I want to push myself and I want to see if I can challenge myself to get this result.
Yeah, and there's so many examples of him demanding the ball in the last 6 seconds of games. And you told me some amazing statistic that he was given the ball and the buzzer shot, and the percentage of him, making the shot, he still made misses and they lost, but it was more times that he made the shot to win the event, and the confidence he had in executing that, because he didn't think about the weight of the win or loss. He thought about the execution of the throw to get the basket, which would give him the result. And so he was reframing that, and people go, I don't know how he keeps doing that, give him the ball, he's got a lot of pressure. We didn't look at it like that. He knew that he could execute a basket shot from any point in the basketball court. There was, no matter how many people were on him, he could still execute that because he was thinking about the shot rather than the result. And I think that's another thing that people think too much and focus too much on. You think of the AFL Grand Final or the NRL Grand Final, you've spent a whole season, and they're unique sports because they have a final after paying. Whereas a lot of other sports around the world, the champion team is the team who finishes on top without a grand final. In a lot of sports,
soccer being the main one,
the main thing. So come grand final day, it is a real clutch game, and you want to perform at your best on that day. And I've listened to some coaches how they went about getting their guys to think about it as just another day, but it's not. It's definitely not another day. And to try and convince them that it's just another day is, I think, going down the wrong track. I think they have to embrace the day for what it is and not be afraid of it. Bring it on. And that's the thought process they have to have. And we're talking the same in an Ironman triathlon or a big event that you're preparing for, whether it's a marathon, is, this is a big day, but embrace it. Bring on the day, because I'm ready and I can't wait for it.
Yeah, definitely. And the important part of Michael Jordan's stats was he did miss a lot of game-winning shots, but no one remembers that. They just remember the winning ones. And we've spoken about this with the perfect example is Peter Sagan in cycling. People don't know that he has come second a record amount of times. It's insane how many races. I think it's 110 races or something. He comes second place.
Or third as well.
And no one will remember that. They just remember the amount of times he's won because he keeps putting himself in that situation. So for you personally, you won't remember the times that you made a mistake or stuffed up because you'll learn from them, and you will remember if you keep turning up to challenge yourself when you do succeed.
Yeah, and he's not shying away. He's putting himself into the hardest events possible. And he's won that many world titles and key marquee events, one-day classics, green jersey, Tour de France. He keeps coming back and winning more and more, but he's putting himself in that position. A lot of the guys will avoid races where the best people are at because they've got external influences putting pressure on them. He's a classic example of a true racer who wants to be against the best and bring on everybody. I'm here to, and I'm sure he gets nervous because he wants the outcome that he's there for. And I think the seconds and thirds that he gets drive him more to say, well, I'm not happy with that. I want to win the next time. And so he's getting rid of all that nerves because his determination to perform better is just, nerves are like clouds. You want to see blue sky, and it only takes a few seconds and thirds to change your thinking to say, get out of my way, I'm here to win. And the nerves are all disappearing when you start thinking like that. And that's the way to harness the energy, the nervous energy that you're creating And that's a really good point, is to harness that nervous energy in the right direction. I don't want to be second again, or I want to beat my PB. I've been struggling to do this for 6 months. Today's my day. I'm harnessing all of my nervous energy into focusing on how to execute.
The power of switching your focus.
Yeah. The framing of your thought process, right from the start of this podcast, we've talked about that. And I think that's the single most important thing. Everybody has anxiety and nervousness, but you've got to reframe it to your advantage. And, it only takes a few unhappy, unsuccessful events that you've been in, and it doesn't have to be the biggest one you've ever been in, but not performing, it gets rid of that for me. For the next event is, stuff that up today. When's the next? I'm looking at the calendar. When's the next one?
Puts the fire in the belly.
Because I want to actually rectify what I just did wrong. And why was I so nervous there? I was so nervous because I hadn't prepared properly. I was so nervous because I wasn't confident in my ability. I was so nervous because I was worried about other people's performance. I was so nervous because they were all the wrong framework of thought process. And you're doing it to yourself, but you just can't change it. And the more you do those events, the better you become at it.
Yeah, I've absolutely done that exact experience to the T, where I've been way too nervous before a race and just put too much energy, wasted energy into wondering how I'm going to perform, and I didn't perform well. And then after, I'm just going far out. Like, it was so frustrating to look back and know how much energy you spent into that, and you go, I just want to race the next race, and you go to the next race, and you cannot be bothered spending a second on being nervous. You just want to go run as fast as you can.
Well, you don't want to waste another opportunity. And like, I look at a performance like you've talked about, that's just a waste of. It's almost a waste of time, but it's not. You've actually learnt something really valuable. You've learnt that degree of thought process created a really poor outcome. I always use the football analogy of the grand final, and it's happened a few times. Guys have taken a mark in front of goal, 40 metres out. If they kick the goal, the team wins. If they miss, the team loses. So they have to kick a goal. I can't kick a point. They go back, and all they're focusing on is, I have to kick this goal. I have to kick this goal.
Or don't miss.
Yeah. And footballer A is that person. Footballer B, I go back, I have 10 steps back, I focus on my run up, nice and smooth, run straight, look above the goal umpire's head, kick through the ball with dropping the ball as close to my foot. He's thinking of completely different things, follow through, keep my head over the ball, and then look up after I've executed and watch the ball sail through the goals. Whereas the other guy's going, I hope that it sails through the goals. He's thinking about the wrong things. And therefore, he's more likely to miss that goal than the person who goes through the routine.
Absolutely. So in summary, it would come down to two main things. It's one, your preparation, which includes your entire training preparation leading up to race day, and then the plan that you need to execute. And then two, your actual mental strategy on race day. Yeah,
you've summarised it perfectly. And if you have anxiety, don't worry. It's normal. Plan it, prepare, and execute. They're the things you concentrate on, and the anxiety will be in your favour.
So I know you actually wanted to touch on, to finish off with, keeping your motivation in training. So, because our motto is plan, prepare, perform, and that planning and preparing is so important so you can get to race day and perform as well as you want. But often we lose sight of the end goal in our training, and we can often lose motivation. And that's such a big part of this whole process to alleviate that anxiety on race day.
Living in the moment is something that I'm really big on. If you're thinking about today's session as I've just got to get through this session, and all you're thinking about is it's taken too long to get to where I want to go, that's the wrong framing of thought process as well. And if you can think about this session, I've got 16 weeks until my big event. I've only got 16 Tuesdays, and today's Tuesday. And 2 of those Tuesdays are taper, and one Tuesday's an easy day, and another Tuesday's an easy day 4 weeks later. So in actual fact, I've only got 9 Tuesdays left out of this 16-week program. And I know those Tuesday sessions are so important for me to improve come race day. So I've got to execute today. The motivation to think like that So Tuesday, this day, I've got to hit these numbers. And then next Tuesday, it's the same session, but I know that I have to hit numbers slightly higher. And the next Tuesday is the third go I have at this session. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to try and have 3-week build. So living in the moment of the day, and then the outcome at the end of the 16 weeks will be there, and you'll be standing there on the line confident as anything because you've just executed day by day. So don't think too far ahead. Execute each session as it is, and that takes away the anxiety. That takes away the stress because you're not just thinking all the time and just getting the patience that you have to do it that way is incredible. The motivation and the patience to train like that. And as I've said many times, if it was easy to execute that, everybody would do it. It's not easy to do that because every session is quite difficult, and the patience required to wait 3 weeks to get the outcome for that particular block, that is time consuming in thought process and in actual effort. So you have to be in the moment all the time. What is the purpose of this session? And sure, I get nervous about, far out, the high intensity Tuesday session's coming. Am I ready for this? And so I'll do things like, I'm going to start at this number, plan out, if I'm executing, plan out what I'm going to do. Even before it, warm up a little bit more, a little bit better than I have possibly before. The day before, do some stretching, possibly make sure I've got the right fuel in me pre that event. I'm talking about your general diet for the day. I'm not talking about your training fuel. But yeah, making sure everything's in line and you're giving yourself enough time for it. So living in the moment that definitely enables you to have less nervous anxiety levels come that session, come that week, come that month, come that end of that race preparation. And the patience is what I wanted to make sure everybody understands, that you don't want to be at your highest race level at week 4 of a 16-week program. So you've got to think about it like that. And as we talked about earlier, framing all of your thought process to understand the purpose of where you're at week 4 compared to week 8, compared to week 12, compared to week 16. If you think about it properly, then you're not going to get frustrated or anxious about that you're not where you want to be. Where you want to be is on race day at the top of your game. It's very hard to hold being on top of your game from week 4 to week 16. A period of form can only be 4 to 6 weeks at the most. So you'll come into form come that last block, and then it's a real job to hold it and get some really good training done so that come race day you're fresh enough with no fatigue to execute. And knowing all that information relates back to taking away the anxiety and the nervousness around race day.
And I love that frame of, if it was easy, anyone could do it. And that's why it is so rewarding when you complete challenges like this, when you set a goal, set a race, and you complete it, or you set a goal for a half Ironman or Ironman or a PB and you do it. If it was easy, it wouldn't feel nearly as satisfying, and a lot more people would do it.
That's the key to it. The satisfaction of the consistency, the effort,
the discipline,
having value on it, setting a target, and all of those things, having patience, they're not easy, but it's extremely satisfying. But it's very unsatisfying when none of those things, you're inconsistent, you don't have a target. That's easy, but you're not going to get the result you want. When it's easy, that's the problem. You don't actually have value for what your efforts are trying to achieve.
And this is what you do to motivate yourself?
For sure. That's the framework I always put in. And you've seen me decide, there's my target. Okay, I'm starting from here. And in the interim period, how do I stay motivated when I'm trying to almost keep my fitness from dropping? Well, that's my motivation. I don't want to see periods where I might not be improving during this 5 or 6 week period, but I'm not going to let my fitness drop so that I have to start from a further away point when I decide. As each program and each year you have a new program that you've made some targets and goals that are different to other years, or they may be the same, you just want to better them. So you want to keep arriving at the new program at a higher level of fitness than you were previous, because as you know, if you go away from the end of, let's use the football analogy or soccer analogy or basketball or cricket, you go away from the end of the season at a high level because you've had a whole season of skills and fitness, and then it's time to rest, let the body recover, and then you come back next year. The really good athletes who become better footballers or better cricketers are the ones who spend all summer or all winter doing the things they were weak at and coming back to the new training season with a higher level of fitness than they left the previous one. So they're building from a higher level all the time. Whereas the people who get to that level and then have a rest and do nothing, take no control over their fitness, it takes them almost half the season to get back to where they were at the end of the last season, and they might improve a little bit towards the end of the season. So they've got this up, down. It's almost like over-under training block, whereas we want to see a straight line. And in that straight line, we might see a step, not a reduction. We see improvement, we see a step, which we call a plateau. Then we see improvement and we see another step. So we want to see a set of stairs where there is very little times when you are decreasing.
You don't want to see you going up the first step, then back down the first step,
That's
then up
right.
the first step, then
And
down the
there's
first
nothing worse than doing some hill climbs, and in the middle of one of the big hill climbs, you lose 50 metres of altitude that you've worked so hard to. You get 2 seconds of rest going downhill, and then you've got to catch that back up again. So we really want to make sure that that's the system we're trying to achieve. There will only be a few reasons why you can't achieve a step improvement. It's injury or sickness, and you've seen your own performance management chart when you've been sick or injured. It just goes from a fitness of 90 down to 45. It is so frustrating.
So to summarise, how to handle race nerves, to answer the question, how do you handle race nerves, it's just so much not about the race itself. It's just so much everything to do to prepare in between, your whole thought process around the process, and it's just taking the attention away from whether you're going to get the outcome or not and just executing.
Yep. Plan, prepare, perform will have a little bit of anxiety in it, but it's good anxiety and you can direct it the way you want to rather than it totally controlling you. And that's probably the main thing that I want the listeners to hear.
Perfect. We'll finish there. Thanks very much for listening to another episode of the Get Fast podcast. If you want to download our Expert Secrets cheat sheet, that's a cheat sheet of the very best tips and advice all the experts that have come on our podcast have said to help you train smarter and race faster, go to getfastpodcast.com. That's getfastpodcast.com. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, if you enjoy the episodes, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It really helps other triathletes and cyclists find us, and please let us know why you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions as well, we're getting a lot of listeners now. We're getting some good feedback and some good comments from people. But we'd love to hear your questions of stuff you hear on the podcast and what you want to clarify or get us to dive deeper into some concepts. If you have any topics that you want us to discuss, then definitely let us know as well.
Yep.
But that's it for this episode. We'll see you next time.